we are, let's face it, we're waging a proxy war. We're waging a proxy war, but we're not giving our proxies the ability to do the job. And for years and years now, we've been allowing them to fight with one hand tied behind their backs, and it has been cruel. It has been cruel, and we need now to give them what they need. So.
Well, hello, that's me again. Today is September 18th, 2025. It is Thursday, I believe. I wanted to really say things about, for example, Jimmy Kimmel being kicked out of his job, which is long overdue, and basically reaction of the so-called left-wing media and figures who are not really left-wing. I just want to reiterate the point which I make constantly. Washington Post, CNN, all those people, corrupt American teachers, many of them, who actually drowned United States or helped to drown United States in the imbecility, wokeness, deviance, and generally in the ugliness, essentially. Those people are not left-wing. Everything what is being called left-wing in the United States, for example, or in the West, is not left-wing. It's the neoliberal, basically death cult, whose only basically task, as financed by all kinds of the organizations and personalities, is to completely finish off the combined West. In terms of the culture which was given, great one, make no mistake, we live in the world shaped by the combined West. And so I wanted to talk about it, but you know what, I constantly have to basically go back to the square one and explain to people that what you're dealing with is not left-wing. It's the same outgrowth of the liberal and neoliberal economic policies which drove combined West into the ground, and United States is also on the basically on the near precipice, essentially economic precipice. But what you saw in the beginning is essentially explanation of this, because this is also the result of this so-called culture and education, or rather lack thereof. Boris Johnson is obviously an imbecile, yet he was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He was the guy who, well, he's a genocidal maniac, which is primarily the type of the products they produce in all those, you know what, so-called humanities degrees programs in the Ivy League, or in all those, you know what, privileged universities in United Kingdom, in some Sorbonne in France or something like that. This is who they are. They are the result of all that. And whenever people say that Labour Party, for example, in UK is left-wing, no, it's not left-wing, really. There's nothing which they really support there, which really makes life of people easier. Unlike, you know what, and this is pretty much the same thing as the libertarian fanatics from the so-called GOP. They are not conservative. United States doesn't have conservative party. It has some conservative voices, and most of them are not really conservative because obviously they were supplanted with the Israeli firstist fanatics from the Scofield Bible, heresy, and the Christian Zionists. They are not conservative. There's nothing conservative about those people. When your fundamental, the founding stone, if you wish, the foundational stone of your ideology is not conservatism in a normal sense. I'm not going to be going there into all those, you know, the basically tangents here about the beauty, the culture, the history and things of this nature. But when it is just a libertarian dream of not paying taxes and essentially ripping off people by, you know, what so-called free market instruments, look at the Wall Street. These are your conservatives, orgies, drugs, all kinds of things, and all fanatics from the APAC. That's pretty much who they are. And so, I want to stress the thing that many people do not understand and what the murdering of Charlie Kirk, assassination of Charlie Kirk, produced in the world. Many people still cannot grasp the consequences of it. And this is not about, for example, Fox News, for example, so-called conservative. There's nothing conservative about them. They're just a bunch of the, Israeli forces, cretins there. The same as there is a CNN or what have you. But this is what it is. Let's not talk about the real left wing or real left ideas and what passes in the West for the left. This is not to say that I'm left wing. I lean in some economic issues to the left, real left. But generally speaking, I also have a libertarian streak in me, but streak, not the foundational philosophy of my life, for example. So, but that's the separate issue because I'm really sick and tired listening to people who say that they are leftists. Hollywood is not left-wing. They are basically deviants, pedophiles, and this is the crap, which covers themselves with all this so woke philosophy. And there are many people in the United States and around the world who buy into this crap, So, but the question is, which also is kind of, adjacent to all that, especially when you see yourself how Mr. Trump basically humiliates the King of England, if you wish, of Great Britain, Charles the, whatever the name, the title, 3rd, 4th, whatever, 25th, I don't care. So, and that tells you everything you need to know about what we have, essentially, in terms of the elites in the combined West. And the question here is, suddenly, well, not really, is U.S. military competent? And I've been on record for a while now that, I cannot continuously operate within the framework of the corporate solidarity. And I know there are many talented and even brilliant officers in the U.S. Army, for example, or U.S. Armed Forces. But essentially, top brass of the U.S. military is incompetent. We can see now manifestations of this across the board. And this is not only just the fact that Kellogg, for example, he's a clown, essentially. Corrupt guy to the core. I mean, he doesn't understand war. No American serviceman understands war. They never saw one to start with because they think that the high-intensity police operation somewhere in Iraq or in Afghanistan is somehow the it thing. It's not. But also, when you look attentively at the high-level acting officers of the U.S. military and Pentagon, my God, those people really scary in a sense in their incompetence and lack of professionalism on the operational strategic level. But I am on record and I will continue to repeat it over and over again. Strategy, or essentially military strategy, as it relates to the grand strategy of the state, it's non-existent in the United States. I always kind of listen to with the smirk all those guys from strategic courses, from universities or some war colleges who begin to quote again Sun Tzu and Clausewitz, boring, nauseating, just drop it, all right? I mean, everything what was written strategically in the United States in terms of from field manuals to all those strategic studies and things like that, it's crap, most of it. There's very little. For example, the issues of, as it was expressed by Admiral Sibrowski and his group about the net-centric warfare, yes, it carried a very interesting, kernel of truth, practical and operational and tactical concepts. Great. The most of it, strategically. Who wrote anything strategic in the United States? It never had strategists of the world renowned level, except for the Admiral Mahan. That's it. There was none. I mean, and here we are. So let's start with the thing which explains to you how they think. Because actually, this is funny. Here it is. We start with, it seems like, now we know that apart from being pathetically ineffective, we suddenly have this situation that actually it was Polish missile that caused Russian drone attack damage media. A 3-meter long projectile. It's not it's Project A missile. It's AIM-120M Ram fired from the F-16, hit a residence. It's actually a major newspaper and media outlet in Poland, has reported. The only confirmed damage from what Poland claims was a Russian drone incursion into its airspace was actually caused by a Polish missile fired from a NATO F-16, which struck a residential building. So the question obviously is, so how effective are those aircraft and missiles? Well, not very effective. And fact is that this AIM-120 failed to arm itself and explode. Good, because we don't want Polish people to die for nothing, you know. So Rzeczpospolita reports on Tuesday that most of the drones involved in the incident were not carrying explosives and caused no damage. Yeah, we know that. And the fact is most of those drones were actually probably carried by the Ukrainian side to Poland. However, one exception was in the village of Virikivola, near the border with Belarus, where what was described by Poland, an unidentified flying object crashed into their private home, damaging the roof, but without causing casualties. So, and Western media reporter claimed that home has been hit by a Russian drone. These are Western media. Normal people do not go and work for Western media, who are, for the most part, establishment media, and their reporters, and they're imbeciles. Many of them were criminals because they push this violent agenda, by the way, part of which we saw as the result with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It is all from the same root, essentially. It just basically branches out into all kinds of the manifestations. So, and here we are. As everybody already understands by now, except for the American military and many of those so-called advisors, we have the situation that essentially it was a false flag and pathetic, as usual, pathetic performance by the so-called air defense capabilities of NATO. And so we have now this guy. So, here it is. This is James Stavridis. James Stavridis is a Bloomberg opinion columnist. Bloomberg is it's the sewer, essentially. There are normal people do not work for, again, as I already stated, for US media. And he is, look who he is, a retired US Navy admiral, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, and Vice Chairman of Global Affairs at the Carlyle Group. What he proposes, how a no-flight zone could save Ukraine, Russia's brazen drone incursion to Poland and Romania demand NATO response in the skies. James Stavridis is American admiral. He is the guy who have been honed through all this, essentially the degree meals in the, which is military education in the United States. Because by now, no serious service academy in the United States produces proper officers who understand the realities of the 21st century warfare, and none of them, zilch, understand what they are dealing with in terms of Russia and Russian armed forces. James Stavridis doesn't understand that. He is American, well, general or admiral, and he's the guy who grew out of this framework of the much, basically, confabulated, to put it mildly, American military history, and he doesn't understand even what modern navies are. But he somehow, this admiral was the supreme commander of NATO, and obviously it doesn't matter how many months he took in the, war college somewhere, or general staff college, the command and staff college in Leavenworth, Kansas. They are not competent people who go out of there. They do not understand modern warfare. They simply have no toolkit, because U.S. military education and U.S. military environment does not provide toolkit for actually fighting war. It never did. Because obviously United States lost everything it ever engaged with the exception of the, beating and even that they lost in Iraq. So, but they still think that they can somehow provide some air cover. James Stavridis needs to study operations, which he obviously didn't. And especially in terms of the Air Force and in terms of the thing which, and I have to say it openly, United States Armed Forces, they have no grasp of the modern air defense. They're considering the pathetic level of the American air defense and American missilery, of which I am on the record. The United States lost the arms race, not just simply lost, it's by a mile. The gap cannot be closed in terms especially of the hypersonic weapons, and in terms of the air defense complexes of such level as S-400, let alone S-500, or even S-350, not to speak about the short to medium range systems such as S-350 and obviously Buk M3 and Panzer and Tor. The United States has no experience or reference point, neither do Europeans, even dealing with what is that. They just don't have it. And we saw everything we needed to know about, well, in Ukraine, we saw it in Israel, and things of this nature. So, you know what, the best criteria of effectiveness is practice, and especially combat. And, well, we know how it performed, and they cannot close this gap. Well, so let's start to explore, basically exploring what Mr. Stavridis probably doesn't understand. Look what we have here. New York Times. Speaking about this no-fly zone, why don't we call a no-fly zone? That's pretty much how it will describe it. So, we have this. 2 days ago, Mark Santora, reporting from Kyiv, of course, they would never touch real data on war in Pentagon, because for them it will be basically implicit humiliation on how pathetic their level is. So they say a no-fly zone over Ukraine, the challenges for the West would be huge. At least it means that Poland suggests such a zone after a major Russian incursion, but political hesitance and military shortcomings pose clear obstacles. Well, Stavridis, the guy who doesn't understand what war is, he has no clue. Again, United States military doesn't understand what continental warfare is of the scale which is happening today in, obviously, former Ukraine. Mr. Putin today openly stated there are 700,000 of Russian servicemen along the line of the combat contact. So United States cannot even master this. I mean, let alone fight, let alone, I mean, compare or go toe-to-toe with the air defense, long-range fires with Russia. It's just simply not in the same league. And that's what I'm trying to say for the last, 10 plus years. So Mark Santora at least admits that there will be huge issues. But then let's go take a look what else he's talking about. So, and we have he talks about this incursion Russian drones. Yeah, sure. So he talks that the nature of Russian threat has changed as the Kremlin now relies on mass production of long-range drones instead of fighter jets streaking through the skies. What a moron. He obviously doesn't understand what is going on, that Russian Air Force is actively involved both in close air support and, of course, the standoff weaponry. But again, this is the all offsprings of this, confabulated history of the American military, Hollywood, and people who have no clue. And of course, he drinks the Kool-Aid provided to him by all kinds of the scumbags from the Kyiv Nazi regime. And yeah, that's United States has stained itself, not only by supporting the genocide in Gaza, but of course supporting and training the Nazi forces in Ukraine. So there you go. And that's basically they lost any kind of the moral high ground to talk about anything. But here we are. And so he's dreaming, he's confabulating as always. But the political challenges for NATO enforced no-fly zone remain significant. There are no good analysts in the United States on anywhere near this levels of power. Analysts say, and technological advances since 2022 have also made a difficult proposition militarily. Well, how about that it never was possible to start with? But again, you cannot come to, for example, U.S. military academy at the West Point. First, United States doesn't have academies which prepare air defense officers specifically as they do in Russia. And you cannot explain to the average cadet from the, let's say, 4th year of the U.S. military academy at West Point, or for that matter, there's some people in the U.S. Army War College that in terms of air defense, United States is not even in the same universe with Russia. They simply technologically backward. But you know what? What do those Russians know, who are this consistently throughout the second half of the 20th century performed brilliantly in terms of air defense? But well, what can I say? So we go. Here is the strategic issue. That's what passes for strategy in United States and United States military, and basically it shows you how sensitive and how afraid they are, because they know they suck. At least some people know. If Ukraine's Western allies did put themselves on the hook for helping protect Ukrainian skies, it would present a dilemma. If they failed to stop Russian drones, it would expose NATO's impotence. Who said it would? NATO is a paper tiger. So is the US military. They are good only to fighting the Afghan weddings. Let's be very clear about it. So United States wouldn't be even able to deploy anything if it comes down to it. But yes, it is all about PR. They are afraid to be paraded, which they have been, and the world outside confirms it now by its dynamics, and global south now openly laughing at the United States and NATO. And so he is afraid to be exposed, as to have NATO's impotence being exposed. Sure. And then they will go. And if they intercepted them with costly missiles, their only real option with the current defenses, it would rapidly deplete arsenals. Yeah, so again, go to Wall Street, go to Ivy League schools and economics. Yeah, learn this economy, what economy is. No, it has nothing to do with the making money, albeit obviously profitability on the macroeconomic level matters. And yeah, this is how you control your economies. But they do not understand what real economies are, what production of value of tangibles is. Because the United States have been deindustrialized thoroughly. They try to, which is, you know what, I have my vested interest. I'm American citizen. I live here. I want the United States to be economically viable and profitable, but doesn't work that well, right? So, although Mr. Trump today stated that the United States somehow will have the $17 trillion of investment, he obviously is not very good with mathematics, because obviously he added 2 zeros to this thing. But you know, what do I know? And so whenever you talk about this, you know, all those Stavridises, all those Kellogg's, all those the chairman of the, you know, Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mr. K, you know, whatever his name, you know, the general, U.S. Air Force Academy and things like that. Does he even understand what he's looking at? Nope. Nope, they don't. Even those people who have a kind of sense of what they're touching, especially any American general, they will not be allowed to deviate from this ground of the American fairy tales about its military. And for some reason, I don't know why the United States, for some reason, thinks that it's the greatest air force ever. I mean, they didn't know that, probably, that Red Army ended with the largest operational tactical air force in the world in 1945, and with the combat experience, which was simply unmatched. I'm not talking about the obviously exaggeration of the kills by Luftwaffe, but then again, those losers wrote all those documents and wrote the history of the World War II for the US Army or US Armed Forces. So what do you expect? You have what? The sandcastles? That's what happens with the sandcastles. They are basically exposed for what they are by the incoming waves, and usually they are just washed away. And this is precisely what happened. This is why New York Times laments is that, oh my God, it would expose. No, would. It has been exposed completely. It is technologically backward. The table of organization and equipment of the US Armed Forces is that of the 1990s Armed Forces. Europe is not even registering there, with the exception of this basically nuclear deterrent of France. But in terms of the conventional forces, it's pathetic. It's basically third world. But what do we know? We're looking at facts, we're looking at the actual numbers. And then this constant nagging, I mean, the non-stop stating about the finest fighting force in the history, which cannot win a war, about this technologically most advanced. Okay, how about that? Let's go. Oh my God. We have foreign policy. It's a That's very actually interesting, because this is a neocon Russian hating rag. And look at this. China and Russia winning the hypersonic missile race. Well, okay, but it's supposed to be that it's the biggest, and greatest military. But the United States is catching up with the new weapons to come online soon. No, United States doesn't have weapons to come online soon, and especially when you consider the fact that United States and even China, they have nothing which even in the same universe as, for example, 3M22 Zircon anti-shipping missile, which also has the reserve mode against land targets, and it was used already in combat to a devastating effect. So United States doesn't even have long-range hypersonic weapon, also known as Dark Eagle, in the IOC, initial operational capability. And still, they are trying to say what? They are catching up. United States has nothing, not even supersonic missiles, which can hit anything that moves. But here we are. But you know what? This is interesting. So if you are such a great military, how come that you basically lost this race and United States lost it? Because obviously we are talking not about single weapon system. Militaries fight as the system and the systems of the system. And that means what? System means not just strike weapons, air defense, anti-ballistic missile defense, satellite constellation. But can you imagine explaining it to some imbecile from the School of Journalism from Harvard or Stanford or some, it's useless. And so, and then, while foreign policy in the, very rare lucid moment, they say that, oh my God, 2 days ago, that Zelensky is losing touch with reality. It's hard for anyone to make sense of the Ukrainian president's latest military reforms. Well, it's not about reforms. It doesn't matter how you change the beds in the whorehouse. It's not gonna increase your profitability. So maybe instead of moving the furniture in the whorehouse, how about changing the prostitutes? But obviously it doesn't work here because Ukraine is running out of people, literally. And so we have now that, if you take a look attentively at Mr. Gerasimov report to Vladimir Putin and doing the summary of the campaign, and here we have, this is yesterday, the Russian army is advancing in almost all directions. Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov said during the inspection of the implementation of combat missions by the Central Group of the, Red Army direction. It's machine translation and it sucks, but yeah, it's Russian army. Our troops in the zones of special military operations are advancing in almost all directions. And yes, it's very active. And if you go and take a look at the tally for yesterday, you can see yourself it's growing. And what can I say? I do not want to post here the video of how the NATO trains and those Nazis from Ukrainian armed forces and what is happening, but it's already making its rounds, but it's very upsetting video. It's about the Ukrainian soldier using a woman with child as the shield, hiding behind them. And then, of course, two Russian soldiers trying to save women. So he eventually abandons them and he wounds that woman. And then, of course, the Ukrainian FPV flies in and kills the wounded woman. So this is NATO training. This is how United States and NATO will be remembered, their armed forces. They supported Nazi regime. And as such, United States lost any right to speak on any issue pertaining basically resolution of the conflict, which we know how it's going to be resolved. It's just a matter of how we, so to speak, elaborate on the issue of the advancement of Russian army, which advances every day. And so, you know what, it's, Trump, you saw yourself who Trump is. And so Mr. Lavrov, what can I say? It's, here it is. This is pretty much sums it up. Lavrov speaks today about Trump's disappointment with Ukraine talks. Nobody cares anymore what White House thinks and how they disappointed or what have you. United States, by supporting genocide in Gaza, by supporting Nazi regime in Kiev, lost any kind of their even ground to demand anything or to be disappointed. And here's Mr. Lavrov says that the US president wants quick solutions, which are not always possible, Russian top diplomat has said. Well, the reason he wants quick solutions because, as you saw yourself, Trump is very uncultured man. And he is getting old also. He is not Biden, obviously, make no mistake. He is very much alert, but his essentially narcissism and, yes, desire for quick solution tells you everything you need to know. United States doesn't have grand strategy. It doesn't have professional people who develop grand strategies because primarily all those so-called political scientists who come out of those Harvard, Stanfords, what have you, Brown universities, those people are morons. And strategy and defense policies in the United States has been written and created by morons. Look at Rand. They are clowns there. I mean, first, they obviously do whatever the study you can order them for money. As long as you pay them, they can come up with any kind of study. So this is the only thing they are good at. And when you look attentively across the board, what is happening right now, it is a catastrophe. And it is a catastrophe of the elites because they are, well, not only they're treasonous when you look attentively at US Congress, my God, they care only about Israel, they don't care about United States. They're a bunch of cowards, not all, but most of them are corrupt, blackmailed, and that is why United States still cannot get itself out of shackles of those insane policies of the last 30 years. They believe that they won the Cold War, which in some sense they won, but not in the way they think they are. They never were. US Army was actually 12th Army in the world before World War II. Just to give you an example, the United States doesn't have tradition of continental armies, real continental armies, which standing armies with a large number of the personnel, with a powerful table of equipment, organization of equipment. And so we saw ourselves how it all basically came to the conclusion. And here we are. Now Mr. Trump disappointed. He better used to it. Get used to it because this is what he's going to continue to experience. Russians don't give a flying coitus. Trump decides to do something positive, sure, Russians will talk. They will make offers. Like, for example, we have this still continuing negotiations behind the closed curtain, but yeah, you cannot explain to some State Department or from US Congress or these graduates, most of them morons from all those international relations, Georgetown degrees in government, what the real world is. They are uncultured. They are pretty bad, and we saw it in the most profound way because, as we know, it's Clausewitz, by the way, the bad cause, or for example, as founding fathers wrote in James Madison wrote, the bad cause seldom fails to manifest itself in the Federalist Papers. But yeah, the bad cause manifested itself so much that essentially we're looking at a historical turning point. The West is done. But Poland, being Poland, look what Poland did. Poland blocked Chinese. Yes, if you look attentively at the today at the border between Belarus and Poland, you will see yourself that Poles completely close railroads there in the border between Belarus and Poland itself. And as you can see yourself, Poland begins to kill Europe, which is already killed essentially for all intents and purposes. And as you can see yourself on this map, China also suffers because of that. Because it was the idea of this, Belt and Road Initiative, which essentially is coming to not for a simple reason that Europe will be poor. It's already becoming poor, and as a market, it's not going to be a solvent for a long time now. And what can I say? You saw yourself what Mr. Trump did to King of England. Good Lord. I mean, it's a clown show. And it is pathetic that we have people like Stavridis or Kellogg, they're nincompoops who wouldn't understand the first thing about modern war, who are pretending that they give a sound advice. They don't. Stavridis is butthurt, as most of the American top brass, because they were paraded by the incompetent people, and the results on the ground in Ukraine tell you everything you need to know about NATO's capabilities. This is what I wanted to tell you guys today. And as always, in the end, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee and two. And what can I say? Have a nice rest of the week, and I'll talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.